how to turn a side project into a full-time gig. This is the Early Days podcast. Hey everybody, welcome to the Early Days podcast, the show about the hustle, the excitement, the doubts, the success, the failures, the ups and downs of building a business from scratch. My name is Marin, and with my co-founder Julian, we interview fellow entrepreneurs about their experience from starting businesses. As we're building our own apparel company and documenting our early days, we wanted to go behind the scenes with other entrepreneurs and find out what their early days, weeks, months, and years were like. On today's show, we talk to Pat Walls, founder of Starter Story, which is a digital hub where successful entrepreneurs share their experience of how they built a business. In fact, we first connected with Pat when we were asked to share the DULO story earlier in the year. All the articles on the platform are inspiring and also provide specific advice and insights that help others get started. In our conversation, we talked about how Pat started Starter Story as a side project which he eventually built into a full-time sustainable business. We also got into the details of how he approaches collecting interviews, his thoughts about content planning, frequency, and much more. Make sure you check out Starter Story at starterstory.com and read some of the interviews by fellow entrepreneurs. Also say hi to Pat as well on Twitter. He's at the Pat Walls. That's THEPATWALLS, and follow his entrepreneurial journey. Now, without further ado, enjoy our conversation with Pat Walls from Starter Story.
So my name's Pat Walls, and I'm a software engineer by my professional job, I guess. But I actually just quit my job, which we'll get into later, hopefully. So I've kind of, in the last year, well, I haven't been a software engineer my whole life, but I guess it's kind of, I'm 28 years old now and kind of came across this whole coding thing like 3 years ago. And then over the last... Sorry?
How did you stumble into it?
So that's a good question. So I think I actually just wrote this blog post about this, but I kind of stumbled into it my whole life, but never really made the jump to actually learn how to do it. I really should have learned a long time ago is what I'm realizing. No regrets, obviously, but there's a lot of opportunities. I knew it was the thing for me to do, but I never just committed to it. So my kind of story is throughout high school, I was, kind of into tech, and these are like the early Web 2.0 days. So like dig.com and Engadget and all those websites. I don't know if you guys remember those.
Yeah.
So those days I was kind of like into this internet. There's this website where you could get free iPod, or you could earn free iPods by like referring your friends. And there's this little scheme you could do. And I was making like websites back then, trying to make money as like a 14-year-old kid on the internet. And then after that, I kind of went to high school and got back into got out of that whole internet scene, went to college and ended up studying accounting and economics. So not coding, but so then after that, after I graduated college, I had an accounting degree, and I went and worked at this like really corporate firm, like one of the big 4 accounting firms. And I realized it was like the worst thing ever. It was not for me at all. Like the corporate, now I'm working for myself, but that was the exact opposite spectrum, like working like in, suit and tie and just doing things that were just seemed so ridiculous, like corporate procedures and things like that. So I quit that job. And then I went and worked at this I was in San Francisco, California at the time. And I went and found this startup. They had like 200 employees, but they were a classic Silicon Valley enterprise tech startup. So I started working there, and I was doing more like technical stuff. They had this software that was like kind of like coding. It was kind of like this SQL-like software where I would go and like implement these applications for these companies, and I like really enjoyed that. So I was like, okay, well, this is awesome. I think the next step is to learn coding. So I went to a coding boot camp in San Francisco, which is like 3 months of just straight learning how to code, learning how to build applications, and like a really rigorous process. Did that, and then I became a software engineer. I worked for a couple companies doing being a classic programmer. And that's how I stumbled into it. Sorry, it's a super long story, but that's how I got there.
No, it's funny because it's similar to our stories as well. We both didn't graduate, anything related to computer science. And the timing is also kind of the same because we got into it about 4 years ago. And it was through Treehouse. I don't know if you know, it's an online platform basically doing the boot camp thing, but a bit spread out.
Yeah.
So it's a similar story. I mean, it's a good gig to get into out of practicality reasons, but then of course you can use it as a kind of a springboard for your next project.
Yeah, definitely.
So what did you go into next? And let's maybe touch on as well when you quit. Did you have a plan, or what was that period like?
When I are you asking about when I quit after the corporate job or
after the coding thing?
Oh, yeah. So after the coding, so what's great about that coding boot camp is they have this business model where you only pay if you get a job. So they're so confident about their curriculum and their course that they know they can land you a job. So when you get the job, you pay them a percentage of your first year's salary. So that's their business model. So they're they do a lot of work to help you get a job. And, the easy part was learning how to code. Probably the harder part was getting a job with no experience in San Francisco. So I was pretty lucky. I mean, I applied. It's crazy. They have this. They approach it like a numbers game. They have you apply to 50 companies a week. So I applied to, I think, 350 companies in the span of a month and a half, and got maybe 10 actual, maybe 12 actual phone interviews, and then got landed maybe 3 in-person interviews, and then got just 1 job. And that was my first job. And then, so it was kind of a crazy process how they have you do that.
What kind of a job was it?
It was just a software engineer job for a real estate tech company. And it was on Ruby on Rails was there. That's what they taught in the boot camp was Ruby on Rails and React and basic SQL and Ruby and stuff. So there's a lot of Ruby companies that are in Silicon Valley and in general. So I got a job at a Rails shop, and also doing some React stuff too. But it was just working on a web app is what it was.
And was that the last job? Because you mentioned you just quit your job. That was the first kind of your first gig in programming. And did you have many after that as well?
Yeah. Sorry, it's all over the place for me usually. Yeah. So I got that job. I worked there for about a year, and that was in San Francisco. And I think throughout that year, just became actually a good, not a good, but a normal engineer. Out of the boot camp, you learn so much so fast that you're just I think you just get a job because you're just so hungry to get a job, and you're really not a very good engineer. At least I wasn't. Some people are just naturals, but I'm not. So after that year, I just became a much better engineer, actually working for a real company and doing real work for a year. So then after that, I wanted to move to New York City just for personal reasons. I had been in San Francisco for 4 years, including my other careers and stuff like that. So I went and looked for a job there, and then it was a lot easier to find a job after I had my 1 year of experience. And I started working for this e-commerce company called Dia & Co. And they do plus size subscription clothing for women, which is a really, really popular market. So they're doing really well. And I worked there for a year and 3 months. And over the last year, pretty much after starting there as my full-time job, I was working on this side project. I started learning about, now that I had the ability to code, I wanted to start something on my own. And I actually had started something in my job, during my job at San Francisco, that had failed with some friends. So I was looking to start something new. So I started my side project, and I was kind of working for the last year. I was working full-time at that e-commerce company as a software engineer. And then working on the side project Starter Story, which you guys are obviously familiar about, which is a blog that interviews entrepreneurs on how they got started.
I would love to go into the specifics of that, how you started your side project, because a lot of people I think are getting stuck there. And they usually, at least we've done that mistake as well, like years ago. When you get excited about an idea initially, you go register a domain, make a landing page or a simple website, and that's it. You think you're done. But I mean, and we know as well from experience, that's not really how it is. Curious, can you just take us through this journey of starting Starter Story, and if you can go as detailed as possible, like tracing back your steps?
Yeah, totally. So I got the idea. I was looking at this. I was like, had started my new job. I had gotten like sort of comfortable there. Let's just like, maybe a month or two in, and I was, again, this is classic me, just looking for something new, something better, something bigger, like something to keep up my time. And I came across this Reddit post on r/entrepreneur, and it was about this guy who started an affiliate marketing website, and it was like for some random industry, like, I don't know, climbing or like outdoorsy type stuff, where they just write articles about like popular products or like the industry of outdoor whatever, and they make money from affiliate marketing through Amazon links and Amazon affiliate program. So I saw that, and at the time I was so burnt out from this previous startup that we tried to do while I had a full-time job, which was this B2B SaaS app, which was so tough to make work, because it was like I had a couple different co-founders, and we were selling to businesses, like small to medium businesses. And we had to like jump on sales demos while I was at work. So I had to like leave work in my regular software engineer job for like pretend I was going to lunch, jump on a sales call, or then I get like an email like, oh, this feature isn't working. Like there's some bug or something like that. So I had to like jump out and fix this bug. So I was like, how the hell do you build a company as on the side of a full-time job? I don't have the cash to, and I still, like at the time especially, didn't have the means to just quit my job and build something. So I really wanted to find something that I could work on nights and weekends, and like not stress during my regular job, and make my regular salary and do well at work. So I saw that Amazon affiliate idea, and I was like, okay, that is I think the way to go, because you can work on it on nights and weekends, and there's no really like bugs that you have to deal with, like customer requests. It's really just a content website. So that's why I wanted to start that, and because I had that previous experience that I had. So I immediately, like, just knowing me, is like I just had to get started right away. So I got started right away, and like the idea is, I think that to start a website just for affiliate marketing is not like a great idea, and I'll get into that. So I started, and I was like, okay, what's my industry that I want to build in? What's a niche industry that's not as covered online, like it's not as popular. Like fashion is a bad industry because there's so many fashion blogs. If you want to start a fashion blog or content website. So I was like, okay, I think I know a good one, because I had a friend who does stuff in like the pet industry, and pets are really big, but it's not as like a sexy of an industry. So you can like more easily get clicks in Google or whatever. So I was like, all right, I'm going to make a website about dogs and cats for pet owners. So I started doing that and like hiring copywriters, and I realized like super quickly, like even like after like a week or two of starting this, I was like, damn, this isn't gonna work, because I have no like motivation to work on. I don't have a dog or a cat, and like I don't really care about the industry at all. So I was like, shit, what can I work on? Like, what do I like love that can also make money as a website, and I will be passionate to work on it and really like grind it out. And at that point I realized, oh, entrepreneurship. Like I personally love podcasts, like How I Built This, and just love reading books about entrepreneurs and how businesses got started. And then indiehackers.com obviously is this huge website that just blew up and got acquired by Stripe like just a few months before. And I was like, okay, I want to start to do this blog and content idea, but I want to do it for entrepreneurship. And I really, really liked the way that indie hackers did it with the interviews. So instead of hiring people to write content, you just interview people, which is just a lot more of a scalable approach and costs a lot less because you don't have to hire people to write stuff. So I was like, I want to start the indie hackers, but I want to start it for like non-technical founders, like people that are like I had a couple friends that started like, brands or like physical e-commerce products and things like that. I was like, there doesn't seem to be like a really good resource online for people starting physical goods, like stuff you'd see on Kickstarter or Indiegogo or Shark Tank or things like that. So that's when I really had the moment. Yeah, that's how the idea got started. And I don't want to keep going if you guys want to keep hearing more about like once I actually got started, but I'll stop there for a second.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense to go kind of your first steps. How did you think about, the first interviews, picking those companies, and the hope, because you were still working at your full-time job, right?
Yeah. So this is about a year ago, and I just started I built a WordPress. I just started using WordPress. Even though I'm an engineer, I was like, I should just focus on getting the interviews and not build some crazy website because, the thing I would love, the saying is like, if you really enjoy working on, I guess I would really enjoy working on the tech side so much that I might not actually do the hard part, which is getting the interviews. So I was like, I'm just going to do it on WordPress and find people to interview because that was the hardest part, especially now it's like not so hard, but back then when you don't have a website, like who do you interview and like how do you convince people to be on your website? So to find interviews, I just started with friends. Like I told you, I had like a couple friends that had started physical goods, products, brands, whatever. So I started calling them and I called them on the phone and we had like a phone conversation for like an hour and a half. I record it and then I transcribe it to text, which is, I don't do that anymore, but it was it's really hard to take an audio interview and then condense it to a text format that it's first of all just hard to do because there's not like a great technology that will convert it well. But then once you actually convert it to text and you send it to the person, you're like, yeah, this is the interview we had. They're like, oh, I don't like that. So the way you talk I think is a lot different than the way you'd want to write. So that was like something that just took forever. I got like reaching out to friends and then friends of friends. I got like 5 interviews completed doing that. So at that point I had like 3 interviews and I just started, I wanted to have like this kind of like, I know indie hackers had this launch where they had like 10 interviews and they went like crazy on Hacker News and a few other like websites. It was just like such a brilliant idea at the time and they launched it really well. But for me, I was just like, I just need to get this out of here. I have 3 interviews done. So I just started releasing them. I just started posting. And this time I didn't have any following or no one knew about the blog. And I just posted like on my personal Facebook, got like, I don't know, maybe 100 people on my website for like that whole month. The early days were like, nowadays it's like 30,000 people are visiting a month. But in the first month, it was like 300 people visited the website. So I was just like, and yeah, I guess it was just pushing out how I could. But that's one thing that I always tell people now, or I think about a lot, is a lot of people put out side projects that are like maybe a SaaS app or something, and they release it on Product Hunt and all the other places you can release your project, and they do like a launch where social media, whatever, and they get all this traffic. But then after you launch it, you don't really have like a lot of ways you can keep bringing it in front of people. And that's the beauty of like blogs and content businesses and podcasts. And every time you release an article, you have like another a mini launch. And the other piece that's really great about that is now that you like, people expect you to launch. So like a lot of times another issue is like motivation. Is like, oh, well, I released this and now I don't have the motivation to release something else, like another feature or whatever, because no one's asking for it. But with content, it's like you're already just committed by the fact that you released a blog. Like a blog is just, everyone knows that you have to release content consistently. So you just do it. Like there's really no choice. So that was two things that I really learned, is that a lot of people ask, like, how do you keep going? And my answer to that is, like, I just really didn't have any choice but to keep going, because like every time I released a new interview, it would get like maybe a little bit more people would have viewed it, or something happened that was like unique and cool, and I experimented with something else, and just like that constant feedback loop is like probably what made it successful.
So how did you go from 300 to 30,000 visitors?
Yeah, that's a great question. So that was me I think the number one thing is just consistency and being persistent about releasing content, and doing so in like a organized manner. So like having the agreement with myself that I would release 3 interviews a week, which is pretty much what I did up until now, which is more. But like just knowing, sorry, there's the background noise there. There's a dog. Just knowing how much I had to, like, doing the weekly newsletter and all that. So just the consistency. Like, I don't think I've ever missed a newsletter since I started, and it's been a year. And I've never gone because I can kind of plan out posts ahead of time. I've never gone a week without posting. So I would say just the number one thing is the consistency. Actually bringing people to the website, to get specific about it, is I found the best channel for me, and it's kind of an untapped channel, but it's Reddit. And I found that Reddit is, a lot of people are a little bit scared of Reddit because it's you get a lot of hate on there. It's an anonymous forum, so people can say whatever they want. And the kind of culture there is very anti-corporate, anti-establishment. So it's definitely an interesting place to share your content, but it's also a monster website. It's a huge website. I think it's like the 3rd biggest website in the world. And they have, in terms of traffic, and they have just different niche for they have every single niche you can imagine because of how subreddits work. So I know indie hackers really got their momentum from this forum called Hacker News, just a Y Combinator forum. But I really got my start from the r/entrepreneur subreddit. So I would share my interviews in a Reddit format on Reddit. So instead of just so most subreddits don't allow you to just link to just link. In Reddit, you can have a self-post and a link. So on some subreddits, they really don't like spam, so they only let you self-post. So I would take all the content from my blog and I would paste it into Reddit and make it friendly. And like in the intro, I'd like introduce myself and say who I am and all that. And then because I'm sharing the revenue numbers of the people that interview, it usually is like you can make sort of, it's not clickbait, but it makes the title really interesting. Like I would make a title like, do you guys allow cursing on your podcast?
Yeah.
So there's this, one of the biggest posts I did is this company that I interviewed that sells like chocolate penises. It's like a prank. It's like a chocolate molded to look like a penis. So I made the title, $30,000 a month selling chocolate dicks. And and it just like blows up on Reddit because it's like really funny. And who would how could you not click on something that says $40,000 a month selling chocolate dicks? So I would just, and then I do like, I don't know. One guy had a bidet. One of my first big ones was like a guy that sells bidets. So I just said like $10,000 a month selling bidets. Like people are just gonna click on it. And then when you click on it, it's this giant interview that's actually providing value. It's not some spam. So the Reddit was I think was a really big thing because although it doesn't drive like a ton of traffic to my website, it builds I personally think it builds a really big brand because you can see when you post on Reddit, you can see actually how many people viewed a post. Like you see upvotes. Anyone can see upvotes, which is like The most upvotes I got is like 1,000 or something. But when you look at the views of the post, most of my posts that go big get like 50 to 60,000 views. So that's like really, really big numbers. It's not like maybe like only a couple thousand end up making it to my website, but they're still seeing my brand and my website. And like, eventually they'll become subscribers, hopefully, and building the brand. And that's also helped attract a lot of new interviews. I've got like not all of them, but most of my big interviews have come to me and said like, oh, we've seen you on Reddit and we want to get interviewed, like that. So that was a big one. And then some other stuff that I've done is Hacker News is another really good source for traffic. I had one interview that just went crazy on there and got like 35,000 people to visit my website. But it's not really as much as my niche. This is more the e-commerce side. They're the more tech. Another thing is organic search, like Google search is starting to finally happen for Starter Story. So that's helping it grow a lot. And this is really nice because you don't have to work for it. Like when I do Reddit or social media or whatever, you're always having to work. But with organic search, not as much. And then, just social media. I think a lot of the traffic on the website is direct. I think it's like now it's like 30, 30, 30, like 30 direct, 30 social, which is like social media and Reddit and all that. And then 30 organic search. So I think a lot of the interviews also just get shared around through email or text or whatever.
If I can interrupt you, sorry, about Reddit and Hacker News in particular, do you because you create the post on Reddit and you have the whole interview, the whole copy there.
Yeah.
How do you link it and integrate it? Basically, how do you drive traffic back to your website? If you can mention the specifics there, I'm curious.
Yeah, sure. So all I do is, I think about it more in terms of providing benefit for the interviewer rather than me, because I think that is more important than getting traffic to my website. Like I have a million chances to bring people to my website. Like I can post on Reddit multiple times a week, but it's more important to provide that benefit to the people that I interview because they want the publicity. So all I do is I just say, hey, everyone, like in the beginning of the post, and you can, I don't know if you guys have show notes or whatever, but I can send you my account so you can see it. I just say, hey, Pat from Starter Story here with another interview, and I link Starter Story as the hyperlink. And then at the bottom, like I have a little bit of an intro, because the important thing about Reddit is don't come off as just a copy and paste. You want to look like you put like at least some work into sharing with the community and building your rapport with the community. It really goes a long way, to be honest. And so I do that. And at the end, I just put a link to the full post and say like, hey, if you want to see this post with the photos and whatever, like you can see it there. But I never ask for, like, I try to keep it as non-spammy as possible and providing the most value to the Reddit community as I can. So even though that it only maybe if I have a really big interview, it will drive, let's say 50,000 people to the Reddit post according to Reddit's stats, and it may drive 1,000 people to my website. But the traffic that does go to my website is really high quality because people, I can see through Google Analytics, it's like they stay for like twice the amount of time that any other people reading stay, and the likelihood that they subscribe to the newsletter is like 2 or 3 times as likely. So like eventually they click through, and that's kind of how I see it, I guess. If that makes sense.
What would you say if you have that data? What would you say is kind of the common threads that it makes the interviews go big? Is it for example, is it the title? Is it the network of the actual interviewee? Then maybe sharing his network, or have you seen from your experience any common threads? Yeah. When it comes to
it's a really good question. Really good question. So what works on Reddit? I'll say what works on Reddit first is Reddit loves, again, the non-spammy kind of male. It's obviously a way more males on the website than females. So products like Chocolate Dicks was just like through the roof. People love that. Unique kind of really niche stories and products. Like another one that did really well was I interviewed this company that sells aviation focused products. Like they have this meme. They have like a couple Instagram and Facebook meme accounts for people in the aviation industry, people that do like air traffic controller type jobs. This is this whole niche. And this guy makes like $35,000 just catering to this niche, selling them products, giving them memes on their Instagram or whatever. And the title for that one was like $35,000 a month selling memes to air traffic controllers or something like that. Reddit loves a really unique story and they hate a not unique story. Like if a story is bland, which, you know, I'll admit that not all the stories on Starter Story are the most unique. Often I won't even post it to Reddit because it's just, again, just trying not to come off as spammy, giving a really good story, a unique product, or also obviously like high revenues is also gonna blow through the roof. So one that did really well was we interviewed Kalo, Q-A, I don't even actually know how to pronounce it, Q-A-L-O. That's the biggest interview we did in terms of revenue. They do like 2.5 million a month, and they're like on the Inc. 5,000 list or whatever. So the ones like that obviously do really well. So high revenue, like a big numbers. I think I noticed this on YouTube too, is that YouTube video, a lot of people that are smart on YouTube are putting dollar signs, monetary amounts in titles. I think in general, just even, it doesn't even have to be like high. Like I've seen this video on YouTube where it's like they compare two people that make someone that makes a really low salary and someone that makes a really high salary, and they like go through the days of their lives. And just because they put the money amounts in the title, I think the posts do better. I think that's just like I've noticed that since I've started Starter Stories, just putting a money amount in your titles or in your, however you attract people to your content works really well. So I will always put the money in there. And then, yeah, unique and weird stories do really well too.
So when you started interviewing people, I wonder, was there a story that stands out?
Yeah, definitely. I really like the story of one of the first, so the first one that ever went big on Reddit was this guy who sold the bidets, which I mentioned earlier. It's like a butt cleaning device. I don't know what they call them anywhere else, but it's like he has like a handheld version, which is really popular in countries like India, but it's not at all a thing in the US and Canada. So this guy took this idea and he started selling it in Canada. And he just has like this really cool story about how he was working this corporate job and he started getting into selling these bidets online, and he became almost like a plumber because he wanted to make sure that they work. So like after getting off his corporate job, he'd like go be driving around and installing bidets in people's homes to make sure it was like the perfect product. And he really understood the product and the tech and the industry, I guess. So I thought that was a really cool story, and that was the first one that really blew up. So that one really did shape what Starter Story became, I think. Yeah.
Right. So at what point do you decide, okay, I have enough of this balancing full-time job and this project is stable enough or allows me to sustain a lifestyle where I can go full-time on it?
Yeah. So for me, it took, I started Starter Story in November last year, and here we're at, or maybe like October last year, and here we're at November, and I quit my job last month, so early last month. And I would say that, and I had, the revenue was like 1,500 or 1,700 around that point where I quit. But I actually I always knew that I wanted to quit, but personally, my situation is like, I'm actually in it, was and still am, not as bad anymore, but in some personal like student loan debt and stuff like that. So maybe if I had the means to quit earlier, I would, but I was basically just saving as much as I could for when I was going to quit. But actually what ended up quitting, and I don't know if you guys have seen this, but I did this thing called the 24-hour startup, where I launched a website, or I launched a web app in 24 hours, and I live streamed it on Twitch. And after I did that, it kind of like blew up on Twitter, and a lot of people are now like doing live streams on Twitch and all that. So I did that, and I did that in like late October on a kind of a whim, and it has nothing to do with Starter Story. It's a totally different thing. But I was just like kind of bored and wanted to create this product that I've been thinking about for a while. So I did that, and I launched a startup in 24 hours. So I streamed myself like coming up with the idea, buying the domain, coding, like planning the features, coding up with the Google API, which is, I did this project where you can like create a blog, your own personal blog on Google Docs. That was the idea, which is just like pretty basic, small idea. Did that and then built like the landing page and like finalized the app and did the testing. I did it all in a span of 24 hours on Twitch, and like 10,000 people watched it, and it just completely like kind of went like kind of viral in the this indie hacker maker community on Twitter. And I gained like 1,000 or 2,000 Twitter followers. And at that point, I was like ready to quit my job, but I wanted to give it another 6 months and just keep saving. But after that happened, I was just like, all right, this is the moment where like something good came out of this, and I don't think I can have a full-time job anymore. And I just need to like move. I left New York City. I moved back to, I moved to my mom's place in Utah just for the time being. And now I'm going to go overseas to live cheaply, because the income that I make is like not like my old salary, but it's enough to sustain myself. Like if I lived in Thailand or as a digital nomad somewhere. So going back to your question is, if that didn't happen, I probably would have been doing this for another 6 months and try to get to $3,000 or $4,000 a month in revenue on the project, and then would have quit.
How are you monetizing Starter Story, by because it might be useful for anyone who's passionate about creating content, but then when they have the audience, some people struggle with monetizing that. How are you approaching it?
The way I approached it was so getting sponsors, so having the newsletter sponsored and front page sponsored by companies. I think the advantage that I have is I'm selling, or I guess the businesses that want to get in front of my audience are like selling to other businesses. So like my audience is businesses, e-commerce businesses that are willing to spend more money than, let's say, if you have a website about like, I don't know, Apple products or something like that. It's a lot harder to monetize a website about Apple products, because what are you really going to sell? It's a lot harder to sell because you're selling to consumers, which are going to buy a lot less. And in general, it's just harder to sell. So for me, even though my audience is pretty small, the audience itself is pretty high quality. It's businesses that are, always, and especially e-commerce businesses that are, they do buy a lot of, because they're not engineers, and the engineers often have this mindset they just build their own tools and make it as cheap as possible. That's the way I think. So I know that, I feel, but e-commerce companies are way more inclined to buy products and services that they need to make their business run better. So it was pretty easy to monetize the website with a very small audience. Like in comparison, I was monetizing at like maybe 10 or I started the website, and then like I didn't monetize it for like 3 to 4 months, just building it up. And I honestly had no idea how to monetize a website. So I was just like putting it off and just focusing on growth. But once I got to 10 or 12,000 visitors a month, I just started emailing companies that sell software to e-commerce companies, like review software. So like when you sell your product, you want to get reviews on Amazon or in other places to help boost the how your product looks with reviews. They sponsored me they sponsored me for like $300 or $400 a month. It was really small, like nothing crazy, but those kind of add up. You have that one, and then you have your newsletter sponsor, and then you can just put like native ads on your website. So like instead of using like Google Ads cents or whatever it is, where it's like pennies on the dollar, I would just come to agreements with these companies and say, hey, I would put this ad. It's not going to be blocked by ad blockers on the website, and it's going to cost this much, and this is how many clicks you can expect to get. And then we just like make a deal through PayPal. So that's kind of how I monetized it. And it wasn't that easy. It was like just a lot of cold emails to these companies and like coming to deals like just on like not that much money. But as it grows, that becomes a decent way to monetize the website. But eventually I want to focus more. And this is something that I've done since the early days of like just, wheeling and dealing native ads on your website. Is now I'm focused on long-term sponsors. So getting someone to sponsor the website for 6 months rather than 1 month, and getting someone to sponsor the newsletter for a longer time. So you just have that baseline of cash, and then you can focus on content and features. And then also what I want to eventually build is like a membership to Starter Story, like where you get premium features, access to more content, and you pay a monthly fee. So that's where I see a lot of business, a lot of publications going as they get bigger. Like obviously like the New York Times has that model, and they're doing really well. And you see a lot of companies publications starting to do that rather than wheeling and dealing ads, which gets really tiring and is not fun. And it's kind of a stressful way to also make money too. So.
Yeah, I can imagine. When it turns to your, you mentioned already, touched on it several times, your consistency. Can you take us through your calendar, your editorial calendar? So how often do you create posts? How often do you email your subscribers? And what care do you take that you don't alienate people with spamming them too much or posting too infrequently so they lose interest and don't come back?
Yeah, it's a great question. I've heard, so I'll walk through the first part of the question. Is the content calendar. Is when I first started, I just had this plan to release like 1 interview a week, and then that quickly jumped to like 3 interviews a week. And I would just, in terms of like how I personally did it, I would just like say, I'm going to release an interview on Tuesday, Thursday, and then Sunday. I think that was what I did, because Tuesday was like when I would send out my newsletter. So I'd always want to do a new story then, and then later in the week, and then on the weekend too is like a decent time to share something, especially on Sundays. So I just do that. And then I quickly realized that I needed like a system to do that, because finding interviews is, I wanted to the engineer inside of me wanted to like systemize everything so that I'm not like just having like a database of interviews in the pipeline and people that I could interview. So I started using this program called Streak, STREAK, which is like a CRM that sits on top of Gmail. So like you can turn your emails into records in your CRM, which is really helpful. So I would use that and then put interviews in stages. So I'd have like, I would also, to make sure that I could release 3 interviews a week, I would have to make sure that I had contacted enough people that would say yes. So I would send like, let's say 50, 25, whatever, 50 emails a week. Or so let's say if I wanted 3 interviews a week, I would have to send an email or be talking to or whatever with 30 people. Let's say 10% people actually convert to a published interview. So I had to keep that in mind and always be doing my constant outreach, and then putting it into my funnel of in my CRM. Like I said, like they're in the process of cold email, and then they've responded, and then they've agreed to the interview, and then now they're writing the interview, and then now it's going through the revisions process, and then now it's getting published. So just, I'm not going to go into details of all that, but you just kind of learn. I didn't know anything about that world before. And it's only me working on it. So, and I have gotten some help, but just kind of figuring out my system to get interviews out. So once I actually figured out how I could release the amount of content that I wanted to, it just comes down to just executing that plan. And then the other question was in terms of like how often to share that content. For me, I don't really see an issue with just posting as many interviews as possible on the website, because I'm not pushing every single interview out as with the same, work on each one. Like, to be honest, there's usually one or every so interviews are so good that I will do all the things I can to share it. But oftentimes I look at things less about, I mean, I try to make sure that each interview is as good as possible, but I'm more focused on just putting out as many interviews as possible. So I do want to eventually scale to right now it's like 7 pieces of content a week, maybe 6. I'd like to get to like 15 or 20 pieces of content. And I don't really see an issue with like overbearing people, because I only send the newsletter once a week, and people are opting into my social media as they wish. And I don't post everything to, like, let's say Reddit. I don't tweet every single interview from my personal account, because I believe that the posting as much content as possible is great for people that land on my website and are, let's say I have 10 interviews about someone starting a company about making t-shirts, then they're going to have 10 interviews, or they can see that maybe those 10 interviews haven't been pushed into everyone's face, but those exist. And then my website is more than just a blog, but I have different ways to filter data. And I do want to build more features like that allow that. And also it's great for search engines too. The more content you have, the more people will come to your website through search engines. So I have been thinking about moving my newsletter to be twice a week, which is, I'm not sure if people want that, but what everyone says on the publisher side, like I've heard some interviews with indie hackers and people that work in the publishing, is just like send 2 or 3 a week. And from the metric side of like your click rates and your open rates will be better. So I'm not really sure how I feel about that, but they also, another thing to keep in mind, which I always hear, or I hear from very smart people, is like, you have this like picture of your business where, how can I say this? You know, every interview, like you've shared, you know everything you've done about your business and everything you've shared, but you have to kind of step out of that and imagine yourself as like a random person that lands on your website or just finds out about Starter Story. Like I have so many old interviews that are so good that I want to be able to resurface those interviews to people that haven't seen them, but it's like really hard for me to envision, like, it feels spammy to like resurface old interviews, but like if you ask, based on what I've read and what I've heard from people, is like you need to be resurfacing those, because 95% of people never even heard of it and would probably like the interview. So yeah. I'm still learning about that, but
I think it's a very good point. Yeah, we kind of have the same, because we try to also put out a lot of content as much as we can. And you kind of feel that there's a lot going out, but then if you talk to people, you know, outside of that, they don't have much context. They're probably reading just the Facebook post, so they're usually following on one medium. Yep. So I guess you can never flood them with content.
Yeah. I think a lot of people get nervous about releasing so much content because you get self-conscious about it. I definitely experienced that a lot in the beginning. You just feel like, oh, now I'm that guy that puts out content like BuzzFeed or something like that. But eventually you just have a mindset change where it's like, if people want to read it, they will. And if they don't, then screw them. Like, why should I care about what someone thinks about how much content that we put out? That's just their opinion. And for as many people that hate your content, like there's on Reddit, I have so many haters. But I also have so many supporters. There's always going to be half as many people that hate your stuff and think you're just making blog spam. And then there's the other half of people that love it and want more of it. So you really just have to, I've learned and still learning that just cannot listen to those people. They're just haters and they're not creators. So I think there's a big difference between people like us that are creators versus consumers. And creators just don't have the time to really think about something like that. Like how much content is being put out by someone is not like something that even concerns us. And it's more when I see someone who puts out like a daily vlog, I have just so much respect for that person. Whereas a hater would be like, I don't want to watch someone's vlog every day, but like, screw them, you know?
Yeah. Well, if you look at, by definition, let's say all the successful YouTubers, Instagram influencers, people, big publication, they always, do a lot of content. So, I mean,
Yeah.
that's kind of a good data point to think about for both of us. You mentioned, you touched on it a little bit, but what are let's say, the 6 months to 1 year plans to start a store in yourself? You mentioned some location changes. How are you thinking about that?
You're saying asking for the next 6 months to a year?
Yeah.
Yeah. So right now, I'm fully working on this 24-hour startup challenge, which is the way I did the 24-hour startup. I'm like making it so that hundreds of people can do it in one day. So that's happening in like 2 weeks. So I'm like fully focused on that. And it's good timing because things get a little bit slow for my kind of business during November and December because it's just the holidays, and e-commerce businesses are working really hard for their Black Friday and their Christmas, which is the biggest time of the year. So it's a little bit harder to get interviews, and in general, a lot, because it's kind of a B2B website, like things are going to be a little bit slow for the next 2 months. But for my plan for 6 months to a year is I want to interview more than just e-commerce. So I'm starting to expand to, again, my goal is to interview mostly non-technical founders. And I think a lot of really, really interesting businesses are coming out of blogging and creators like YouTubers, like we were saying, podcasters, and just even people that are starting tech businesses that are, I guess every business now has a tech element to it. So just lots of people that are starting more than just e-commerce businesses. And I'd also like to, like I was saying earlier, build a subscription model, start making like a more consistent stream of revenue by providing access to exclusive content and things like that. Like I said, the plan is to roll out like crazy amounts of content. So I did 100 and let's just say 100 interviews in a year. I'd like to do like 20. I did like 130 pieces of content in a year with a side project. Now that I'm doing it full time, I'd like to do, let's say how the numbers, like 15 to 20 a week. So that's like, let's say 50 a month times 10 is 500. So I've gotten this far with 100 interviews. I can only imagine what's going to happen in one more year with 500 more interviews or 500 more. I'm also expanding to be not just interviews, but also blog, user submitted content, forum, stuff like that. So from a traffic perspective, I can really only expect that it's going to 5x as well. I hope so, especially with organic traffic picking up and stuff like that. So the number one goal is to really release just crazy amounts of content. And also another thing that I want to do is just build more data features. So like cool, like sorting features, like getting more, I kind of want to build like some kind of LinkedIn style features, like community features where you can see businesses, like I can go see you guys, like your guys' profile and like all the businesses you've created, more than just DULO. So like you guys would have your own profile and starter story. And then this would be like almost like more LinkedIn style where you can connect and get data on lots of e-commerce businesses and stuff like that. So that's the goal. I mean, now it's really just coming down to just executing on that and making sure that I can push out and do all that content.
Yeah, well, it's a solid and a busy plan for the future. Very nice. Can you tell us where can people find out more about Starter Story, how they can reach out to you if they want to, and any other plugs or links that you want to share?
Yeah. Starterstory.com, STARTER story.com. And then you can find, I post a lot on Twitter, like just like I do revenue every month. I post a revenue report of like how much I made and all the traffic I got and all that. And that's my Twitter is the Pat Walls, ThePatWalls. And then if you want to reach out to me or anything like that, my email is on Starter Stories about page. So you can find it there.
Okay, Pat.
Thanks for coming on, Pat, and thanks for our feature as well. And let's think about a part 2 sometime in the future so we can update on the progress.
We'll love that.
Thank you so much for listening to the show. If you enjoyed it and found it valuable, we would really appreciate your support by liking, rating, subscribing to the Early Days podcast. This program is produced and hosted by DULO, that's me and Julian. And as we mentioned in the very beginning, we make non-iron dress shirts from performance fabrics. If you want to learn more, head over to weardulo.com, that's weardulo.com, and take a look at our products, our story, and the journey of how we're building the business. Until next time, bye-bye.